Hello and welcome to the Turtle Tracks podcast. This is your host Brian Van Hooker, and I'm here with my good friend Aaron Hazouri. How you doing today, Aaron?
I'm doing great, Brian. Thanks for having me on again.
My pleasure. Aaron is an artist who works for NECA Toys and also designed the logo for Turtle Tracks podcast. And right now there's a big fan event going on at Target. Well, technically starts next week, which will be this week.
Supposed to start, yeah, like
Yeah,
April 7th or something. I don't know.
yeah. So there's a whole bunch of new toys coming out from NECA at Target. It's under an event called Holothon. There's Punk Turtles. There's a Casey Jones in a business suit. What else is there? Oh, Adventure Mikey and like Samurai
Mm,
Mikey and Space Raft, Space Donnie.
Space Donnie, yeah.
What else is there? Whole bunch.
There's Split in Half Foot Soldier that comes with the Casey in the business suit.
Yes,
There's, I think, Samurai Usagi is in this group also.
yes, I have that one. So
Yeah,
this event hadn't started last week, but it's been coming up for weeks. So like I've spent a lot of time hunting for these toys. I have some of them so far. So
that's good. Yeah, they're out for some. They've just been putting them out now early. They're not supposed to be. Um, I guess. I don't really know. I don't know anything about the like marketing or sales part of it. So I have no idea if they're supposed to be out or not, but they are out, so you can find them in some places.
yeah. So I'm currently on the hunt for a number of these, often unsuccessfully, but I'll get them, I'm sure. Anyway, I thought we'd do something different for this podcast, which is Aaron. So four of the releases for this set are the Pizza Club Turtles, which are like an ultimate re-release of the four pack of the basic turtles they've done, with new accessories, especially like little buddies and different things. Um, and they're in that sort of VHS style packaging
Hmm.
uh, that mimics the VHS covers from the old days. Um,
The Kids Club, the Burger King Kids Club,
yes.
VHS. That's why
So
they're
yeah,
called Pizza Club.
yeah, right. So remind me, Pizza Club, when that was first announced that these are going to be Pizza Club turtles, a lot of people got worried
Yeah.
that it was going to be some subscription service they're going to have to join or something.
Right. Yeah. It was, which is always fun. We like to see people freak out over over nothing.
Like, what am I going to? I have to sign up for like no, it's a name because they mimic the beef Burger King things. So I
Right.
guess I mean, so what I thought we'd do is kind of just narrow in on each of these four pieces of artwork, which are awesome, and kind of like talk about how they came to be and the kind of nuts and bolts of the process there at NECA for art like this. But before getting into that, like, I mean, maybe it's worth explaining what these are based on. So the Burger King Kids Club, and specifically the artwork of Greg Martin, right?
Yeah, it's mostly Greg Martin's art. He painted a lot of the old VHS tape covers back in the 90s, 80s and 90s. And Dan Elson, who had started these boxes at NECA a couple of years ago, he did really nice ones for most of the other like big figures and the Turtles in Disguise 4 pack. He did all that stuff. I think he did the first Usagi figure, and he painted over a couple of my drawings. And he got busy doing other stuff in animation, so um, they weren't sure what they were going to do with the Evil Rex One box. And Trevor's like, "You can take a crack at it if you want to." And I wasn't working for them full time. I was just kind of hanging out over the summer, working out of their office, working on various stuff. So Rex One turned out pretty good, and he said, "Okay, we're going to do these Pizza Club things, and if you want to take a crack at it, if they're good, we'll use them." And that was again before I was working for them. So that's how I got into these, just because I happened to be there.
No,
That's
nice.
all there is to it. Um, yeah, I forgot what you asked, Brian.
No. I was just asking about Greg Martin and how, like, what are you trying to
Yeah.
capture from those? Like, what is it about those?
So there's a
Bo-
couple things. Dan was better at some of this than maybe I am when he was painting them. There's like certain way that Greg Martin would draw things,
Hmm.
and there's a way he like shapes he would use. I'm not as good at that. I kind of just draw it the way I draw it. But and then there's a way he would paint things. He'd use an airbrush. He'd use I think some acrylics, and he would use some just different techniques he would use. I own a couple of his pieces, so I can kind of um, study him, I guess, and see how he would do what he did. And so our goal is to try to capture that like airbrushy kind of look without it being too digital, which is kind of tough. Um, and yeah, we just kind of want to get that look, the colors that he used, the really bright colors, um, the cartoony look to everything, not real complicated. Uh, yeah, that's kind of what we're after when we do most of these. Although we're kind of getting away from the strict like Greg Martin look because I kind of draw things the way I draw them, so they're going to look like some weird hybrid now of me and Greg Martin. But the goal is to get it to look like a Greg Martin style paint.
Well, he was an influence on you anyway, wasn't he?
Little bit, and not as much as the cartoon guys that I followed
Okay.
back in the 90s, but his stuff was everywhere. I mean, he didn't just do turtles. He did like I think he did My Pet Monster and Flintstones and Looney Tunes stuff. So he did a ton of stuff. But I was not a painter, so and I never really painted much before this. So I wasn't super as into his work and didn't know like the details of how he did things or of his techniques or the way he would shade things. So a lot of my days before starting these paintings was just like looking at blow ups of Greg Martin paintings, really, really close to see what he was doing and how he was doing it, and just kind of trying different things out in Photoshop and try to get that look.
He passed away in 2013. I was just checking it out.
Yeah, 2 years ago. He was really big in video game art.
He is Sonic, like a lot of Sonic art.
Yeah, yeah. And video game people are like crazy when it comes to buying art. So all the video game art is worth a fortune. And I think after he died, somebody went in and bought a bunch of the stuff directly from his family. So I think one or two people own a lot of it.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
but his stuff's out there. You can get online and find big, nice scans of some of his stuff. I have a couple of his pieces. I think I still got some. But yeah, they're really cool paintings. He was
His
great.
turtles were very like chunky turtles. They were very like,
They were, and that's like one of the tough things for us is if you'll look at his early ones and his later ones, there's a big difference between the way he would paint them. The early ones were a little bit meaner looking and a little bit like
oh yeah,
darker. And then later on, when he got to like the hokum hair stuff and the like four turtles on a baby, they got a lot chunkier and a lot like puffier and more
yeah.
balloon. So we try to find like an in between to make the to get the VHS to get the boxes like not too much like the early ones, but not too much like the later ones either. So it's kind of in the middle. But yeah, he was really good. His the way he would shade things is kind of what's the word for it? I don't know. It just there's a technique he would use. It's not difficult, but it's a hard thing to replicate on a computer. So you
Oh,
have to just kind of try different things.
so I guess getting into these individually, let's go in classic turtle order here. So first up, we'll do Leo. Um, I mean, so the Leo you have is him in like a sewer, like sword point at the camera. Like what were your initial proposals for the Leo artwork for this?
Well, there's sketches somewhere, but I knew we were going to do four of these. I thought the theme song has some like iconic moments with the turtle, so I thought I would do four sketches for each turtle. Because at the time, again, I was a freelancer, so I wasn't getting paid by the hour. I was getting paid by the piece. So I don't want to put a ton of now I'll do 30, 40 sketches if I have to. But at the
Oh, no.
time, like I don't really want to do that many. So um, I did four sketches for each turtle. And I don't remember which one. I think I just kind of did them in a random order. Might have been Leo first. I don't know. Leo was the first one I painted. But I did sketches for each turtle in a sketchbook because I still like to work on paper for a lot of that stuff. And clean those up a little bit, show those to Trevor, and he just picked four, the ones of each turtle that he liked the most. Um, and then from there, Nickelodeon has an approvals process, so they want to kind of see the steps. So from there, I had to clean up the sketch and um, do a really tight drawing based on that sketch, mostly for Nickelodeon because I knew it was going to change as I got into it. But so with Leo, I liked the little sketch. I blew it up, and then in Photoshop, and really for all of them, blow it up, and then in Photoshop, trace that just to clean it up a little bit. Um, and then in Photoshop again, I tightened those drawings up. And I think for Nickelodeon, I ended up inking some blue line, just like computer printouts. Just so I had something clean I could show them, even though I knew I wasn't going to use that for the final piece. They just want something that looks really nice. So when they look at it, they know what they're looking at. Because a lot of those guys in Nickelodeon aren't artists, so they don't know what a sketch, like why it's so rough. So they want to see something a little cleaner so they can understand it. So I clean those up, get those to Nickelodeon. I'm pretty sure I did all four at once of those sketches. So they could just approve them all at once. I could get to work on. And then once those came back with the okay, Leo was the first one I did, and it was kind of tough because again, I'm not a painter, and the evil Rex box was the first thing I painted like in forever. So the first step for me was cleaning up, like an actual cleanup drawing, not the one I sent Nickelodeon. So really nice tight drawing on the in Photoshop, a nice tight sketch, and then because I knew I wanted to get that Greg Martin outline look, I printed it out um, like a nice big version of the Photoshop sketch, and then use my light box to just kind of ink over that on a nice clean sheet of board, kind of old school. And then scan that back in, brought that back into the Photoshop file so that I had nice, clean on paper inks to start, like painting on top of. Um, and actually, towards the end of it, Trevor's like, "How did you get that line texture in the inks?" And I'm like, "I inked it on paper. That's how I got the texture because some stuff is just really hard to replicate in Photoshop, and that ink texture is one of those things." Um, so with Leo, let me think. I'm picturing the thing in my head because I don't have it in front of me. He's got a background. He's in like the sewer, but
Yeah.
in the episode, that's not where he flings his sword forward. He's somewhere else when he flings his sword forward, but I didn't like that background. I wanted something more because I knew kind of where the other turtles were going to be. So Leo, I wanted to have a background that was in the sewer, that was something identifiable. So I swiped it from the scene in the opening where Michelangelo is kind of whirling his nunchucks.
Yeah,
He's
originally
in
I
the
thought like, oh, that's straight from the thing, and then it wasn't until I spoke to you that you're like, no, that was actually Mikey's background. I was like, oh shit.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I use that as my reference. Use Greg Martin paintings to see just kind of what his color palette was, and from there it was just like figuring out how to paint, just painting it straightforward. And a lot of my process as an artist is messy. Some people have asked me for like a time lapse video, but those don't work for me because my process is just awful. I have to just figure stuff out as I go. I'm not that good. I'm good at doing a lot of things fast so that if they suck, I can go back and redo it. So with painting, I would paint something like the water Leo is standing in. I'd paint it, suck, delete it, paint it again, and like just trying stuff over and over and over. And so for Leo, pretty sure I painted Leo first and then his background, just to I think that's how I did that. And it was tough for me because I am colorblind, and so I kept having to like go back to Greg Martin paintings, figure out what color palette he was using. Sometimes I have to use an eyedropper or something just to in Photoshop just to kind of see what I was looking at, make sure it was what I thought it was, and and then kind of paint using a little palette that I made up with the eyedropper as my guide. So Leo was the first one. He turned out really nice. I was shocked at the end how nice he looked because I wasn't sure how it was going to go. Because Trevor's like his his if people haven't seen Trevor in podcast, you should go check him out. He's only done a couple. He's done yours and a couple others, but he's a man of few words. Um, and the way he talks is very kind of subdued. So before we started this, he's like, "Well, if they don't suck, we'll use them." I'm like, "All right." So I did the first one. He's like, that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Which from Trevor is high praise. That's like, that is one thing I like about working with Trevor is that there's no, hey man, great job on this. There's none of that. If it looks good, he's like, yeah, it's pretty good. And if it looks bad, he's like, no. So there's no like tiptoeing. Um, and so with the other four, there were some differences in them because I can't remember the second one I did. I want to say it was.
Let me ask you about Leo though before we move on.
Yeah,
Like
go ahead.
what were like what were the other options you gave to Trevor? Were like the other poses or facial expressions or backgrounds? Like what were the
I
other?
think the poses were a little different, but they were all kind of Leo with a kind of determined look on his face because he's the leader, and they weren't that different, but they were just kind of him standing around in the frame differently. The goal for me was I knew these were going to be kind of small in the box, so I wanted them to be
Oh yeah, yeah. The other
easy
ones
to
fill up
read.
the box whole thing. Was that
Hmm?
was that the other like the other ones that have done the VHS boxes? They fill the whole frame,
Right,
right?
the Burger King Kids Club boxes were different. So
They're
they
tiny.
looked like they
Yeah.
had a flat color, and then the turtle or the
Was
pizza.
that somehow? Well, you were just about to say, I'm sorry, but like, what was the what would you have to consider for that? Because it's so it
Well,
yeah,
for
you
me,
use a
what
lot
I
of them.
did is this is probably what everybody does. I roughed them out at their real size, what I knew they'd be on the box. I roughed them out small so I
Oh,
could make sure the pose was clear. And then when I drew it, obviously I drew it big, but I kept that rough as my guide so I would know that the pose, like the details, wouldn't get too lost once we shrunk it way down.
oh, interesting.
And they ended up being bigger because Trevor liked the paintings again, shockingly. So they made them a little bigger on the box than they were supposed to be, just because the paintings look pretty good.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, and then I'm trying to remember when I think the next one was I'm just thinking when they came up with Pizza Club, the little domino looking things on there. I think it's Tile Game Pizza is what it says instead of Domino's Pizza. It
Oh
says
yeah,
Tile
because that
Game
was
Pizza.
yeah, because that was they did that back for the back way back when they did the movie releases. That was
Yeah, and then there's four dots on the tiles. Trevor says because there's four turtles. Like, oh, that's clever. Thanks, Trevor. And he's like that grin where he thinks he's pulled something brilliant off. I'm like, oh yeah,
what
you're a
about
genius.
Donnie? Was he next or
I can't remember which one was next. I think it was Donnie. Let's just say it was Donnie. So with Donnie and with Raph, actually, you know what? Those two are different. So let's do Mikey next because Mikey was fairly straightforward.
sure?
Was right off the
Yeah.
opening. Um, with him, I did a few different like weird breakdancer poses because I kind of knew, and then I think I did one with him holding his nunchuck. And I didn't want him mean. I wanted him to be a pizza, like a fun guy. So I think one with a pizza, one with a nunchuck, and a couple where he's breakdancing. And we went with the breakdancing one. I did a pose. Nickelodeon had some changes to the pose, which were fine. They weren't bad. And then I uh, tightened that up, just like the process with Leo. Did the ink drawing, scanned it in. Um, and then, yeah, just colored it using that opening of the episode as a guide. So that one was pretty straightforward. I had to kind of
That
figure out how to do
background
the
tough because that
reflections.
background is like so like this weird abstract shit.
Yeah, it's
Was
kind
that
of like it's like he's in a dance club or something, and I think those are supposed to be like lights going off. So
but like in
it,
outer space or something? Like it doesn't.
yeah, it's
There's no
weird.
space he's in. Like
But it was fun to paint, and the reflections on the floor were a little hard to figure out. And once I did, I was like, oh, this looks actually pretty good. So he was relatively easy, but Donnie was tough because two reasons he was tough. Um, three reasons. First was all that texture on the wall behind.
really? Okay.
The second, because again, not a painter, and Greg Martin would do it, a certain way, which was tough to replicate in Photoshop. So I had to figure out how to do that. That was the first thing. The second thing was the light source, because he's kind of in front of that machine, but there's no light on that machine that he's making the coffee with.
Oh
So
yeah.
as I'm painting the machine, and the machine on the opening is flat. So I'm trying to paint it and give it some depth, but it's tough to figure that out because it's a flat machine.
Sure.
In the animation, there's no side view. So
You never see that
no,
machine
so
thing. Yeah.
there's a few times where Trevor would come by and say, "Where's your light source?" Because there'd be like just shadows in weird places. And the third thing, this happened with Raph too, but with Donatello, the third thing was I could not get his face right. And sometimes I'll think about something too hard, I'll overthink it, and I could not get his face to look right. So um, I don't think Trevor said anything about it, but what I ended up doing was I had an ink drawing and I scanned it. And then I think in Photoshop I redrew the face just because I did not like the one that I'd drawn and I couldn't get it right. And I think I had to.
But how do you like? What were you doing wrong? Because you've drawn turtle heads
Well,
thousands
here's the
of
thing. When we get to Raph, we'll talk about it because Raph was the toughest one. It's like you've drawn turtle heads 1,000 times, but if you stop and start thinking about it too much, like
Sure.
riding a bicycle or something, it starts to fall apart.
What's it called? Like the what's the baseball term? Is like yips or something?
Something like that. I'm
Yeah.
not a baseball guy. Kenny would know, but um, yeah, you start to like you overthink it, you freeze up a little bit, you panic. There's an episode of WKRP in Cincinnati, the TV show, where Johnny Fever is going back on the radio. He freezes up because he's like, everybody's listening to me. I can't do this. And then I think the girl that's in the room says, just pretend you're talking to me. Nobody else here, just talking to me. So for me, I was like, I don't know how to, I couldn't get it. So I just started drawing Ninja Turtles, just not thinking about it. Just like like when I draw on envelopes, just doing that.
Yeah.
And I got a really good Donatello face that I really liked, and that's the one that I ended up using on the box. But
Oh, nice. Yeah, he's so cute in that box. I love
he
it.
is cute. He's really cute, and that was surprisingly like for whatever reason. And then one drawing, I just there it was. It wasn't like I had to It's just like there it was. That was it. Um, sorry, I got a message that I thought was from some strange artist. Sorry, that was weird. Yeah, that was it. And then the rest of that painting was not really tough. The pizza that's on there, I just added in for myself because there was a big empty spot, and
Oh,
I was
sure.
painting all of these inside a guide. So I drew like a square guide, and I put the pizza outside of the guide because there was a big empty spot. I didn't like it from an artist standpoint, so I painted it in there. But it ended up on the box, and if I known it was going to go on the box, I would have pushed it closer to the rest of like the coffee cup and the machine and everything.
Interesting. Sure.
But
And like, so I mean, what is the light source in this thing? Like, where is
I
it?
don't know. I decided there was just some imaginary light like between Donatello and the thing. Just that was what I used as my light source. But there's no, yeah, there wasn't really a light in there
I mean,
anywhere.
rightfully, the shadow of the machine should be just completely covering him, right?
Well, this is the other thing. Greg Martin didn't always keep a consistent light source. Sometimes he would, sometimes he wouldn't.
Interesting.
So you have to figure out like what needs to make sense and what can I just kind of fake to look good enough. And so there was some of that in there too.
Yeah, Donnie's very, very cute. That's what I love about the. I still love about my podcast logo is like super cute, happy, like bright-eyed thing about it. I just love that, and Donnie has that particularly really, really well in this.
That's yeah. He was like he's probably my favorite face of the four.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Yeah. What about Raph? What was so challenging about that one?
So Raphael, I knew that I wanted him to be one like once Trevor picked that drawing. One, that's the one that everyone's like, oh my God, I can't believe you didn't use the where he's eating the pizza with the sigh or whatever. But
Why didn't you do that?
that's Trevor liked this drawing better that I used. He liked the one where he's come out of the sewer. So that's that's the only reason. I put drawings of all four from the opening credits, but Trevor's like, you know what, I like that drawing better. And when I look back at him, yeah, I kind of like that drawing better too, because he's got kind of an attitude. He's kind of leaned back.
Yeah,
And because Mikey is so identified with pizza, to have Raphael with the pizza would have been a little bit strange, I think. I don't know, maybe not. NECA or Turtle fans can debate this, I guess, but
Donnie has the pizza on the box.
Donnie does have pizza on the box. But again, I didn't know it was going to be on the box. That was more for me
Sure.
than for the box art. But when I knew Raphael was going to be in that the manhole, I knew that I wanted to be on that street with all the ninja establishments from the first episode. I think it's the first episode where there's like Ninja Pizza, Ninja Dry Cleaners.
Or maybe it's the second. Maybe it's the second. It might be the
One of
second.
those two.
Yeah.
Um, and because this is how we do things, I needed it to be accurate to that scene. I wasn't just going to make up the buildings. I wanted it to be like, this is one of those things. Trevor and I both are like, it's got to be pretty as accurate as we can get it to the cartoon. Like it needs to be pretty, pretty close. We'll
Yeah.
fake it if we have to, but we want it pretty close. So I knew for that I wanted it to have that same neighborhood and have those businesses in it. So I had to figure out that weird perspective because it's not straight, got a curve to it to make it a little more cartoony. And the building's perspective needed to follow that curve. The lettering needed to follow that curve. It's all hand lettered. There's no like,
Oh
there's
wow.
no, I don't mind like typefaces if you're typing something, lettering a comic book or whatever. But for those, just didn't make any sense to try to use typefaces. So it's all hand lettered. And so I needed to like that was not something I could put in the drawing that we sent to Nickelodeon. And they didn't really need to see that anyway. They just really want to see the turtle. So for that one, I hand lettered all those businesses in there. And the really tough ones, there's like one that's on a circle or something. I don't remember
Oh,
which
Ninja
one, but
Dentist.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it was tough to get that circle right and to get all those little buildings were really difficult. And then there's in the scene, a lot of the job is watching the cartoon and figuring out where stuff is and when it looks. So in that scene, they're walking through the neighborhood and there's a cut or something where you don't see some of the buildings. So I'm like matching stuff up and there's a gap. And I think I put like Ninja Pilates in there or something.
Yeah.
And then towards the end, there's that's where the scene ends, but I needed more buildings, so I just started putting ninja on the buildings. So I couldn't think of any other ninja business. Um, but when it came time to do Raphael, his head that I originally drew just didn't look right, and I could not figure it out. Redrew it, and I was just like, I don't know what's going on. And Trevor is walking by. I said, Trevor, I cannot figure this out. I've forgotten how to draw a Ninja Turtle. And he's like, yeah, it's scary when that happens, isn't it? I'm like, yeah, I, I, I don't know what's happening. I drew 100 turtle heads and I could not get that one right. So Trevor pulled up a chair next to me and he's like, I think something's going on here, something's going on here, something here's going on. So I drew a few more with him sitting next to me and finally got one. He's like, that one's good. And that's the one that's on the box. The one that I finally was just like, all right, that's it. That's the one I'm using. And there's still some stuff on there. Trevor's like, is that the hand you're going to use? And I'm like, oh, is something wrong with it? He's like, I guess not. I'm telling these stories. He's going to be like, you were awfully forthcoming on that podcast. But yeah, there's a hand on there that's just kind of, it's fine. I think it's fine. I don't even remember which hand it is. But once I got him done, that sewer lid, the manhole cover, took me almost as long as the rest of that paint because it's got a texture on it. And I needed to figure out how to make that texture consistent, how to give it depth, how to paint it, how to make it a circle. Like it was more difficult than the rest of the painting. It was such a pain. It doesn't look like it was that hard, but it was. And I wasn't going to trace something. I wasn't going to like just pull a photo of a manhole cover and I used some as reference, but like I knew the texture I wanted on it, and so I had to figure out how to get that texture. And I ended up drawing like a couple of little pieces and then copying them and then moving it around, and then I copied it again. And it was a pain in the ass. It would have been easier just to draw something, I think. But so those paintings were done through a mix of drawing and painting and Photoshop techniques. Not tricks, really, just techniques for how to do something.
Which one are you most happy with of the four?
I don't know. Leo is my sentimental favorite because he was the first one where I was just like, wow, I can actually do this. But I like Donnie too because I like the face on Donatello.
Yeah.
I like the bright colors in Michelangelo. But I like all those buildings in the Raphael one. So I like all of them. They're all pretty. I was happy with all of them.
That covers most of it. Anything to say about the Casey Jones or that split foot soldier? I love that.
Those drawings are interesting to me because there's like 3 of us that have done those, I think. The early NECA ones, I think we're using art from Nickelodeon, like licensing art. So like the first Rocksteady and Bebop have a different.
Oh, yeah.
And NECA wanted them to look like the old licensing art. So they found, I think, Jason Yang. I hope I'm right. Pretty sure Jason Yang was the first one to do the art for those things. And then I got called in at some point. I think Donatello the Dark Turtle was the first one I did of those. And the goal was you shouldn't know who drew them. Like you should be able to, mine and Jason's and whoever else, they should be totally interchangeable. So like, whereas these boxes, you can look at it and say, that's an Aaron Hazouri piece. The box art, I don't think you could tell. Like there's some stuff where Trevor's like, did you do this? And I'm like, I don't know. So we have to double check like who's drawn what, because once you've done enough of them, they start to run together a little bit.
No, I
And
kind
so
of know why, but why is it so important that the basic boxes be like more like generic is the wrong word, but more like generic like that, whereas the VHS boxes don't have to be? Why is that?
Well, the VHS boxes, because if you look at the old VHS boxes, you can see where Greg Martin's painting things a little differently from box to box. They don't always look exactly the same.
Yeah.
So we can get a little more like artistic with those. And there's some that are coming that I better not say anything about yet. There's some cool stuff coming that looks even a little different than stuff that's come out already. But with those 2 packs, I guess the aesthetic is they want it to look like style guide art. They want it to look like style guide art would have looked in the 80s.
Mm.
So, and Trevor is as big a Ninja Turtle fan as any of us.
Oh yeah.
And he knows that stuff pretty well, and I know it pretty well. I know the 80s licensing art really well. So um, our goal is always, what would this have looked like if Steve Levine and Ryan Brown had drawn it in the 80s and in the 90s? So that's the goal. Like, we don't want to, it shouldn't look like any of us. It should look like them, but it also needs to look enough like the cartoon that it matches that look as well. So
Mm.
the thick, bold lines give it that old licensing art look. And then we try to make sure like doesn't matter as much with side characters, but with the turtles especially, we try to make the turtles look like they do on the show versus what they look like in Steve Levine drawings or Kim Metroni drawings or wherever else. So it's all of us trying to make it look like this other thing, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. That's interesting. What about Business Suit Casey? Was there any like what was that like? Was there a process to?
There was, the interesting thing about those is I did sketches. Trevor liked them. Um, we always draw the full body, even though only a little bit of it goes on there, because you get a better drawing if you're drawing the full figure,
Hmm.
and you get more like action into it. So um, we do the full body, and I drawn those two characters. I think there was somebody else that was supposed to go in there with them. I don't remember who, but we ended up using that split foot soldier, which is a pain in the ass to draw because he has all those little tiny
I was
things.
gonna say that there must be a process. Like, did you have to go from the sculpt from that for that?
I had a picture of the sculpt, a couple pictures, so I used that as reference. And but I don't like tracing if I can get away, if I don't have to. I don't like tracing, and Trevor doesn't either. He doesn't. We don't like when stuff looks traced. Reference is fine, but something just about tracing just seems lazy, and it gives you this flat drawing. So
Mm.
I don't like to do it. So I use that split foot soldier as reference and kind of like had it next to me, traced if I needed to for pieces here and there, but I tried to just have it there, draw what's in there, move stuff around. And even if it's my drawing matches exactly what's in there, at least I drew it. So it's a little bit almost like you want it a little bit off. You got to fake things a little bit. If you take like a turtle figure and turn his head 3/4, it looks different than if you draw it 3/4. So
Sure.
um, it's just one of those things where you want it like to look like the thing without tracing it. And there's that many little details. So with that one, I drew it. Went with a flat color on the inside because I didn't want to be like distracting with all those different colors the toy has on the
Yeah, I was gonna
inside.
say the toy had like all that red and those
Yeah.
the wires.
And then after I drew them, they looked really good. We get our box sample back, and Trevor's like, "Oh, they flipped the die line, which means the die cut around the characters was flipped in the factory overseas." Like, oh, how many of these boxes have they cut already? Like, how easy is this for them to fix? He's like, it's not. We're going to just have to redo the drawings. So, and you can't just flip them because they're not the same. The foot soldier a little bit. I think the inside, I think he's symmetrical on the inside, so it was okay. But the little foot emblem on his head needed to be retraced. And
Wow, yeah.
Casey, you could not just flip because he had the strap over his with the golf clubs in it, the way he was holding the thing. So Casey ended up having to like just redraw half of. And because we use Adobe Illustrator to turn these into vector drawings, some people listening to this may have no idea what I'm talking about, but Illustrator just kind of makes a really clean, smooth drawing that you can blow up or shrink down without losing any resolution because it doesn't deal with pixels. So all of the drawings on those boxes have to be vectorized. And so Casey and this foot soldier needed to be re-put through Illustrator again. And the foot soldier has all those tiny little details inside of his head. So those needed to be manually cleaned up in Illustrator. When I flipped it, put it back through Illustrator, you got to go back through and clean up all those little details. So it was more work than most of those boxes are just because of that flipped die issue. But in the end, I think they look pretty good.
I love that business. I love that NECA made a business suitcase. Like I haven't found it yet.
We have, it's funny.
So
Trevor
great.
will hear from people that are like, "Oh, I dare you to make this," and it's like he's like 6 months ago. This was on his. You're not going to find anybody as well versed in turtles minutia as Trevor. Maybe us, maybe you and I, maybe there's some other people out there, but
I think you and
we'll,
I are about as close as it gets.
I mean, we'll sit around and Trevor will be like, you remember that episode when they had this? And I'm like, no. So we'll pull it up and just the minutia of things is just so, it's just one of those things where we both get into it. And I'm always impressed with the stuff that NECA comes up with. Before I got there, even just
Yeah.
the amount of not just the concepts, but the amount of tooling they do to make these. I don't think people understand how expensive it is to create a metal tool for these plastic figures and
Mhm.
how little NECA reuses stuff. I know people complain about NECA reusing stuff, but if you look at the cartoon figures,
I don't
none of
know.
them
I
are
mean,
reused.
I don't know how you how like. First of all, I mean, I just hate people bitching online, but like I just like NECA. Like, there's so many times where I've like DM Trevor to be like, dude, you didn't need to do this. Like just because it was like
This
this
is
wonderful
I'm
amount of effort that
I'm going
like,
to tell you something about,
excuse me,
and
we're
I'm
not.
new to this industry. Like
Yeah.
I was a teacher for years. I've done other stuff. I've been an artist for years, but I'm new to the toy industry. I kind of fell into this thanks to you and to Ken Mitroni. But I know enough to know that other toy companies don't do this. They don't
Yeah.
spend the money on tooling. They don't fit a niche market. But the big thing is that there's no internal pushback from anybody at NECA about, because it's basically like Trevor and Randy, and then the head guy, the company owner. But there's no like, is there really a market for this? It's almost always, Trevor's got this idea, and we'll pitch it, and nobody at NECA has ever like, I don't think so. They're just like, okay, let's do it. And when you see the sculpts come in and the test shots and everything from overseas, it's just like, wow, this is really cool. I cannot believe they, from the ground up, made some of these toys. I mean, I've got a Triceratops up here behind me, Zog, and there's like, not only are there no reused parts on him, there's no way to reuse those parts. It's like
Oh
you
yeah.
can't use any of them.
I
Same
mean,
thing with,
even
I
when
mean,
it's
just
easy though, like the superhero Bebop and Rocksteady they did
yeah,
the cartoon
yeah,
line.
yeah.
Like, when I found out their new head sculpts, I was like,
Well, and
and
here's the other thing.
they're totally
Trevor is
different.
Trevor's constantly looking at stuff like, how can we improve this? What do I not like about it?
Yeah.
There's always something he thinks can be improved. So when we do the next go around, he's looking at ways to make it better, to improve these sculpts. And a lot of the stuff that comes out, if we're on our third or fourth iteration of the Toon Turtles, I'm sorry, the cartoon turtles. We don't call them Toon Turtles. The cartoon turtles. Um, we're on our third or fourth iteration. What can we do to make these better than the ones we just did, or different than the ones we just did? What can we do to make these a little bit different so the people that didn't get the other versions but are getting this one don't feel like they can still feel like they're getting something different than the other stuff. And he'll look at a head sculpt. He did the first cartoon turtle heads himself, and I was in the office. I'd forgotten that or didn't know or something. I was in the office the other day, like, yeah, when you look at these first sculpts, they don't look as good as these later ones. He's like, yeah, I should have spent more time on those. I'm like, oh God, Aaron, what did you do? But
Those were intended to be more like they were. I remember talking to him about those once, and this is before the
yeah,
Turtles. So he and I were chilling around, we were hanging out in Burbank one day talking
yeah,
about those turtles,
yeah,
and those were originally intended for the video game ones, and they kind of were
yes,
in the middle. So they were part video game, part cartoon. He was like, one of these days I'd really like to make sort of chunkier ones that are like,
yeah,
he was like describing them. And that was
yeah.
4 years before
That
the
was, I mean,
Titans came out.
there were just, and there were so many things that they wanted to do, and now we're to the point where like we're really pushing it to see how deep we can get in this stuff, and
Yeah, and
the
there's not,
Archie
you're
stuff
right.
has been,
Like, there's nobody like so many people do this, do that. Like, we dare you to just like get, I,
yeah,
there's a few things I've managed to kind of get through, especially because I was there when it
yeah,
started.
yeah.
Just like DMing Trevor about like, hey, we need Bebop, we need Bunny Bebop.
Well,
But like,
there's
there are much more times where I'm like, oh, dude, what about this? He's like, oh yeah, I'm well along on that one. So
there is stuff where people will ask, gosh, why haven't they made this yet? And a lot of times it's either something that, for years people wanted Business Suit Casey. And I don't think they knew that, yeah, of course he was on the list. And of course he was being worked on. It's just that we can't, do everything all at once. So there's
Right.
stuff on that list that people would be like, "That's on the list," and it's just. And there's stuff like the that 2-pack, the Samurai and Astronaut that just came out. Kind of what if stuff like that that was never in the show, but that would have been cool to see in the show. There's always stuff like that we're thinking, gosh, I wonder if we could do this. Would this be a good idea? Maybe we could do this. It's literally just us throwing stuff around to see what sounds good. It's crazy. And the cool thing about it is in the Burbank office, it's just me and Trevor, and Travis, who does the packaging, is in there too. And so we'll just like throw stuff back and forth. And Travis will pipe in every now and again, and we'll be looking stuff up and just spitballing ideas. And some of it is crap, but some of it is really fun stuff. I'll draw some stuff up and show it to Trevor. He's like, "All right, those are pretty cool." And he'll take it and pull stuff from this one and stuff from that one and stick it together and come up with something that looks good. And it's a lot of fun. It's really, really cool. I'm really happy that I was able to get in there as a full-time artist, because it's the unfortunate thing for me is I think this is the best version of this job.
Oh,
Because I've
sure.
talked to people at other toy companies that are like, "Oh God, it sucks. It's miserable. There's layoffs. Can't get anything made." And NECA has stayed small and doesn't really want to be a giant company because we can get away with more.
Sure.
So I don't know, it's
Just
really
that,
cool.
dude, that like NECA is special because that admirable amount of effort, like the what is it, the wrestling turtles coming out that we've seen pictures of, like
Yeah.
they didn't take the
And
turtle bodies and slap outfits on them. It's all new stuff. It's amazing.
yeah, I mean, well, and again, that's Trevor who's like, I don't want to make these if they're shitty. I want to make these good toys. Like, he doesn't want to make junk. His goal is to make the best version of whatever it is we're doing. Because it's not like it costs any more money to do a good version of this. He just needs somebody that's got a good eye, like Trevor. I mean, we spoke earlier about Playmates and some of the questionable decisions they make. And it may just be that nobody there understands what they're looking at. Trevor knows exactly what he's looking at and can look at a sculpt where you and I might be like, "Yeah, that's fine." He'll be like, "No, because this is wrong and this and this and this and this." And like he has a really good eye for that stuff. And I don't know that there's that many people working on these toy lines that all of us have such hopes for. That, like, you'll look at different toy lines and wonder, why are they doing that? Sometimes it's as simple as there's not somebody there that knows better.
Sure.
And NECA has Trevor, and he knows this stuff frontwards and backwards. He's a fan first, and if it's not something that he wants to see, then he's not going to do it. I mean, those wrestling turtles, we have the set in the office that everybody's seen those by now, but they've all seen the wrestling turtles.
Yeah,
So
yeah. That's why I mentioned those ones. Yeah.
yeah, and we have a set in the office that we pick up all the time. We're like, these are so cool. These things are
They look
awesome.
like Ken's drawings. Like, oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, who sculpted those, is a huge Ken Metroni fan. So Tom knows what he's looking at, and he and I will get together over Instagram or something, and we'll talk about like other stuff that he's working on, and he'll send me stuff and say, "Hey, can you do a turnaround drawing for this? Because I can't figure out the side or whatever," and I'll do a sketch in whatever style I need to and send it back. And all of us are such big fans of this stuff to be working on. It's like, this is the coolest thing ever. I hope it never ends.
I always end these things by asking favorite turtle, which I've done with you. Remind me who your favorite is. Is it Leo?
I don't think I have a favorite. I placed it Don last time. I don't know. It's hard to pick.
All right, let's go with Don. What's your favorite Donatello NECA release ever?
I mean, if I'm biased, which I am, it's the Pizza Club one that just came out, just because
Sure.
it's got my heart in it. But I really liked. I think it's Donatello on the Evil Rex box. I think that's Donatello, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
And
Yeah.
I like that one because I got to draw him with his head getting crushed. So, and yeah, so I got to go with Donatello. The reason I like Donatello is because Donatello, I think, has the most he's the most hapless, kind of like I don't even know who to liken it. He's almost like Buster Keaton, and then he's like Leo's a leader. He's got that determination thing. Raphael is kind of a sarcastic guy. Michelangelo's the dude, and I think Donatello is kind of like the dopey everyman almost. He's almost like Ray Stantz from Ghostbusters. It's kind of this dopey everyman. Seems the most likely to get himself into silly situations and then get himself out of them. He's the most fun for me, so I think that's why Donatello's
Cool. Dude, a pleasure as always, and
awesome.
thanks for doing this.
Of course. Thanks, Brian.
Cool.
Turtles, heroes in a half shell. Turtle power. They're the world's most fearsome fighting team.
We're really hip.
They're heroes in the half shell, and they're green.
Hey, get a grip.
When the evil shredder attacks, these turtle boys don't cut 'em no slack. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Splinter taught them to be ninja teens.
He's a radical rat.
Leonardo leads, Donatello does machines.
That's a fact, Jack.
Raphael is cool but rude.
Give me a break.